Hi. Okay, what is it? September. September 1. I was going to say May. Okay, I just stumbled across this article. It was back in 2016. I have to read it. There were a couple of points where I cracked up laughing. But the reason why I was attracted to the headline and really wanted to read it was because I have never understood this obsession with being happy. And I have been around people, oh, they need to be happy all the time throughout my entire life. You know, everything is about happiness. Everything is about fun. Have you ever heard anybody say, it's okay. It's okay to feel some joy. Okay. We're a silly people, Americans. We are a silly, infantile people. It's kind of like we never grew up. And taking anything seriously, oh, well, I don't want to do that because it's not fun. Oh, anyway. Oh. It's written by a woman who moved from Britain, a Brit on life in America. The pursuit of happiness has gotten out of hand. America is obsessed with happiness, and it's making us miserable. Do you know that we're the most miserable people? Yeah, we are. Okay, let's get into it. Oh, God. Man. Oh. And I think this really started with the baby boomers. I try to think back on that generation before the baby boomers, and there are distinct differences. But yeah, baby boomers never grew up, and everything is about, I want to play in my sandbox, and if you don't make me happy, you get out of my sandbox. Okay. I'm not going to read the first part, but we've been living in America for a few months now, having moved here from London for my husband's job. Since arriving here, I feel as though I have had more conversations about my own and other people's happiness than in the whole of the rest of my life put together. A few months in, and she's talking about having become a stay-at-home mom for her toddler son. So a few months into that, desperate for adult conversation, I am sidling up to anyone and everyone. Moms pushing swings next to me in the playground, the dry cleaner, the man in front of me in line at the grocery store, and a range of random local contacts scratched together for me by friends back in London. Oddly, the same topic comes up time and time again: happiness. The conversations tend to fall into two broad categories: the agonizing kind and the evangelical kind. As a compulsive overthinker myself, the agonizing ones feel more familiar to me. These conversations are all about questions. Am I with the right person? Am I following my passions? Am I doing what I love? What is my purpose in life? Am I as happy as I should be? The evangelical style conversations are newer territory. In these, people claim to have found the answers. They enthuse about their chosen paths to bliss, convinced, at least temporarily, that they have found the definitive thing that will pin down the happy ever after, even if it's temporary. And I've had a lot of these people in my life. From week to week, their definitive thing changes. Their answers range from the mundane to the mind-boggling. Yoga and meditation, keeping a gratitude journal, a weekend seminar on how to unleash the power within, keeping your baby attached to your body for a minimum of 22 hours out of 24. And most baffling, not least on a practical level, the drinking of wolf colostrum, a friend of a friend that I met for coffee livens up a rather dull conversation about what time her husband gets home from work, with the observation that it really doesn't matter one way or the other, as the most important person in her life is Jesus. It seems as though happiness in America has become the overachiever's ultimate trophy, a modern trump card. It outranks personal achievement and social success, family friendships, and even love. Its invocation deftly minimizes others' achievements. Well, I suppose she has the perfect job and a gorgeous husband, but is she really happy? It all feels a long way from the British approach I was brought up with. Jefferson knew what he was doing when he wrote that pursuit of happiness line. A perfectly I'm sorry. I find this, it's really, I was born here, but I was the first to be born in my entire family. So I grew up with Scots, and, thinking about their personality versus the American personality, there are distinct differences. So Jefferson knew what he was doing when he wrote the Pursuit of Happiness line, a perfectly delivered slap in the face to his joy-shunning oppressors across the pond. Emotionally awkward and primed for skepticism, the British are generally uncomfortable around the subject, and as a rule, don't subscribe to the happy ever after. It's not that we don't want to be happy, it just feels embarrassing to discuss it and demeaning to chase it, like calling someone moments after a first date to ask if they like you. Self-help books and yoga classes and meditation all exist in the UK, of course. There is no shortage of people willing to take your money in return for the promise of bliss. But they somehow don't have the same magnetic pull or inbuilt cultural skepticism providing a natural check. Part of this is that Americans seem to have a deep cultural aversion to negativity. New Age, that came about with the baby boomers. This can be a welcome change, but the pressure to remain positive at all times often results in some complicated mental gymnastics. My son's report card at preschool divided his performance not into strengths and weaknesses, but into strengths and emerging strengths. American problems are routinely rebranded as opportunities. Hence, the filthy bathroom in our local supermarket displays a sign saying, "If this restroom fails to meet your expectations, please inform us of the opportunity." As if reeking puddles of urine are merely an inspirational occasion for personal growth. Oh yeah, the American way. What happened to my highlighting? Okay. My highlighting came off. Well, let's just do this. Okay. We got it back. Boom, boom, boom. All right. So, cynicism is the British shtick, our knee-jerk starting point. I think back to a time a few years ago when I was working at the BBC in London, and our managers booked a motivational trainer to come and attempt to galvanize the dispirited employees in my department. The trainer identified the problem. We were all far too negative and would be happier and better motivated if we would just stop saying no all the time. He suggested that next time someone put forward an idea, instead of responding with the words, no, but insert mean-spirited objection to other person's creativity after the but, we should instead force ourselves to respond with a yes and insert positive-spirited, constructive comment building on other person's idea after and. He made us try it out, kicking things off himself with an initial sample idea, then throwing it over to the next person in line to pick up. Yes, and that's bollocks, said the next person. This pretty much sums up the British attitude. In America, mindfulness is everywhere. I'm rather mindful of my highlighting disappearing, turning into different colors, and that, well, I'm not happy about it, but I'm going to remain positive. Okay. It feels good to be away from this sometimes life-leeching negativity of the Brits, but I also find it hard to throw myself full tilt into the American approach to hunting down bliss. Happiness over here has its own vocabulary, mindfulness, empowerment. Whenever I hear the word empowerment, it always makes me feel slightly edgy. If someone suggests that I suggests that a given activity is going to be empowering, I know it is almost certainly going to be undignified or mildly humiliating or involve heights. Empowerment appears to be the consolation prize for those of us who will never have any actual power. And you can safely assume that no one in any position of genuine authority will be joining in. Creating a Tumblr of photos of your post C-section wobbling and scarred naked stomach. Empowering. And I've seen things like this. They think it's empowering. Okay, mindfulness is everywhere. The hugely popular zeitgeist theory that in order to be happy, we must live fully in the present moment with total mental focus on whatever we are doing or experiencing right this second. Time magazine published an 8-page spread with the front cover titled The Mindful Revolution. It opened with the author, an impressive and decorated journalist, bringing the full force of her considerable mental capacity to bear on a raisin. The raisin glistens. I can't help thinking that, as a rule, food shouldn't glisten. During my first few months in America, I come across mindful parenting, mindful business dealings, mindful eating, and even mindful dishwashing, complete with a detailed set of instructions on the Huffington Post, in printable format to pin above the sink. According to the practices thought leaders, in order to achieve maximum happiness, the mindful dishwasher must refuse to succumb to domestic autopilot and instead fully mentally engage with every piece of congealed scrambled egg and clump of oatmeal on the saucepan. I find mindfulness a hard theory to embrace. Surely one of the most magnificent things about the human brain is its ability to hold past, present, future, and their imagined alternatives in constant parallel to offset the tedium of washing dishes in Pinot with the chance to be simultaneously mentally in Bangkok or Don Draper's boxer shorts, or finally telling your mother-in-law that despite her belief that no one born in the 70s died, using a car seat isn't spoiling your child. I struggle to see how greater happiness could be achieved by reining in that magical sense of scope and possibly to stare down some oatmeal. Though I'm probably just being defensive. As a person who is ridiculously distractible, the whole philosophy of mindfulness comes across as a personal attack. As a personal attack, an invention from some well-meaning body to compel me to stop doing the "which brunch entree are you?" BuzzFeed quiz and go read Llama Llama, I'm a Self-Harmer to my son for the 19th time this morning. Anyhow, I'm convinced that the idea that distraction is a product of the modern age and that our foremothers spent their days in a state of total mindfulness, mindful focus on their children is a myth. The desperate urge to escape the more grinding realities of childcare was surely just as strong for our mother's generation. They just used to pop Valium instead of iPhones. I start to wonder whether the high-octane approach to the pursuit of happiness that I'm seeing here in middle-class California is in any way representative of American culture more widely. And for sure, it is. Because I know that it's in Massachusetts. I know that it's in New York. I sure know that it is in that liberal Democrat sector. Trying to think of all of the Republicans I have met along the way. Were they so? No, that there was definitely a different personality. And frankly, I found that Republicans were a bit more mature. Yeah, we're all infantilized as Americans. But liberal Democrats, there's an entitlement to happiness that they arrogantly feel they're entitled to. So it's not just California. California has always been the headquarters of the great American search for happiness. And I sure do remember that in the 70s, late 70s. I went out to California, the California dream. Okay. And the people I am meeting, although generally not rich or part of any kind of mega elite, do tend to be college-educated professionals, a similar bracket to me and most of my social network back in the UK. Is all this joy hunting just the ultimate luxury for a privileged bunch of high-income Californians? That has much to do with it. A bit of, look, when you are a people that really don't have what a whole lot of Americans did have, we, being the richest nation ever to have existed with a middle class that never existed until the great American experiment. Money, comfortability, not having any worries. When you work in the farm or work in the fields or more in a survival mode, yeah, happiness is not on your radar. You're just trying to get through. So, a bit of digging suggests not. Suggests not. What's not? Well, the question was, so California always being the headquarters of happiness, and the people I am meeting, although generally not rich, they are college-educated professionals, similar bracket to the author of this article. Is all this joy hunting just the ultimate luxury for a privileged bunch of high-income Californians? No. The explicit and focused quest for happiness as a goal, distinct from the rest of life, is seeping through virtually all sections of American society. Oprah Winfrey, the reigning queen of the happy seekers, is widely considered to be one of the most influential people in America, having brought her signature brand of self-improvement and spirituality to hundreds of millions of Americans. Yet around half of her audience had a household income of less than $50,000, the U.S. median, and I have to wonder if that median has dropped. But also a similar proportion had no education beyond high school. Mindfulness is seeping into public education system throughout the nation. In Ohio, Tim Ryan, Congress member, Tim Ryan recently received a sizable federal grant to bring mindfulness classes to the state's elementary schools. Although at least one school discontinued the program after parents complained that they were taking valuable time away from education to put students in a room of darkness to lay on their backs. Americans buy $1 billion worth of self-help books and audiobooks each year. Meanwhile, the internet bursts with links to motivational happiness seminars all across the country aimed at the unemployed, rebranding destitution as an exciting opportunity for personal development. That's right. We became a people that even, and I remember reading, oh my God, Irma Bombeck, is that Baby Boomers, you remember her? And she was writing about, and this was decades ago, she's now gone, she had cancer, and she wrote actually a pretty funny piece on how she couldn't quite embrace how positive it was that she had cancer, that it was a whole new opportunity to open up doors, and that's what she was being told. Oh, this is going to be wonderful for you. She felt rather alone because she didn't feel it was wonderful, and she wanted support, and she wasn't getting it because everybody was so positive. Okay. Destitution is not an opportunity for personal development. However, if you fall into that very quickly, that personal development may just arise naturally. It occurs to me that all these happiness pursuits often don't seem to be making people particularly happy. When a new American friend persuades me to try out a yoga class, you can almost smell the tension and misery in the room. Although it's a little hard to determine cause and effect, as anyone who was already feeling happy would be unlikely to waste the sensation in a fetid room at the YMCA, contorting their body into uncomfortable positions. The happy person would be more likely to be off doing something fun, like sitting in the park drinking. Before moving to America, I didn't really give a whole lot of dedicated thought to whether I was happy. Like most people, in any given day, I will experience emotions and sensations, including but not limited to hilarity, joy, irritation, ambivalence, excitement, embarrassment, paralyzing self-doubt, boredom, anxiety, guilt, heart-stopping love, resentment, pride, exhaustion, and the shrill, insistent buzz of uneaten chocolate somewhere in my house. It's hard to pin one definitive label on all this clattering emotional noise, but I'm confident that if you add them all up and then divide by the number of emotions, or whatever other formula they use to calculate these statistics in all the research studies on happiness that I start to notice in the press, then you reach an average falling squarely into the box marked contentment. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with friends about their pursuit of happiness and that I should be doing this and I will be much better and happy if I only did what they suggested. And I was always really rather surprised at how focused people are on achieving happiness. And I would always say, I don't have the happy thing on my radar. You know, what I would like is just to be content. And I always said that happiness it's a byproduct of living life as fully as you can, and it's a byproduct of having trusting relationships in your life. So, the more conversations I have about happiness, and the more I absorb the idea that there's a glittering happy ever after out there for the taking, the more I start to overthink the whole thing, compulsively monitoring how I am feeling and parenting my emotions. Am I happy right at this moment? What about now? And now? Am I happy enough? As happy as everyone else? What about Megan? Is she happier than me? She looks happier. What is she doing that I'm not doing? Maybe I should take up yoga. And the happy, focused, have a judgment. They think they're better than because of their positivity and their hyper vigilance to get happy, or hyper focus on getting happy, and there you sit, and then they judge you because you don't have the same kind of personality. The whole process starts to become painfully, comically neurotic. Workaday contentment starts to give way to a low-grade sense of inadequacy when pitched against capital H, happiness. The goal is so elusive and hard to define, it's impossible to pinpoint when it's even been reached. It's a recipe for anxiety. And I will tell you that a whole lot of my former friends were anxiety-ridden. To an outsider, and we should always get an outsider's perspective, So I love reading the non-American perspective on America. Everybody should always get an outsider's perspective on if they have labeled them something that is, well, a group. That's why the Republicans really should get an outsider's take on them, and Democrats and Christians and all. Okay. In an outsider, it can sometimes feel as though the entire population has a nationwide standardized happiness exam to take, and everyone is frantically cramming the night before to get a good grade, like a stony-faced "that's hilarious" after a joke in place of laughter. Another mildly unnerving staple of conversation in this country, it appears that somewhere along the line, the joy has been sucked out of American happiness. Oddly, even adjusting for emotional openness, my new happiness-seeking American acquaintances seem no happier and often more anxious than my cynical, joy-slacking British ones. My instinct is that this is because happiness should be serendipitous. Yes. And I was very happy to read the byproduct of a life well lived. And chasing it in a vacuum just doesn't really work. I wanted to dig a little deeper, so she did, and she came up with these studies. Okay. Because she wanted to find out if her hunch stood up to scrutiny. In other words, Americans really are not a happy bunch. So, after some initial research, I find a couple of somewhat surprising studies. In the first, participants were given a questionnaire and asked to rate how highly they valued happiness as an explicit goal and how happy they were with their lives. Surprisingly, the higher the respondents rated happiness as a distinct personal ambition, the less happy they were in their lives, generally, and the more likely they were to experience symptoms of dissatisfaction and even depression. This in itself doesn't prove cause and effect. After all, it makes sense that people who are unhappy would be likely to value happiness more highly. So the researchers designed another experiment. This time they gave one group of people an article to read about the importance of happiness, and then afterward they showed them a happy film. Second group of participants were shown the same film, but without the article. The group that had read the happiness article reported feeling less happiness from watching the happy film than the group that watched without reading first. The authors of these studies concluded that paradoxically, the more people valued and were encouraged to value happiness as a separate life goal, the less happy they were. And if you're just put in a room and here, watch this happy film, it's kind of like a serendipitous happiness that you have. But when the focus becomes the happy, read this article and then watch the film, less happy. Like an attractive man, it seems the more actively happiness is pursued, the more it refuses to call and starts avoiding you at parties. Americans as a whole invest more time and money and emotional energy into the explicit pursuit of happiness than any other nation on earth. But is all this effort and investment paying off? Is America getting happier and happier? Are Americans more content than people in other countries? Is this great American search for happiness actually working? The answer appears to be a pretty clear no. Somehow this great nation that included the pursuit of happiness so prominently in its founding principles has been shown by various international comparison studies to be one of the less happy places in the developed world. Although these studies are not without their problems, with different methodologies producing different results, Gallup's 2014 Positive Experience Index, an international comparison study of the moment-to-moment happiness of people living in different nations, ranked America at an underwhelming 25th in the world, 2 places behind Rwanda. And yeah, you want to know why? Because we're delusional. Not happy. But it's always nice to have a goal. For all the effort that Americans are putting into hunting down happiness, they are not actually getting any happier, according to the General Social Survey, a large-scale project that has been tracking trends in American life since the early 70s. There has been almost no change in American happiness levels since 1972, when records began. Every year, with remarkable consistency, around 30% of Americans report they're very happy. It's a fair chunk, but a figure that remains surprisingly constant, untouched by mindfulness or megachurches, by yoga or meditation or Gretchen Rubin or attachment parenting or New Age philosophy, or we remain as miserable as we were in the 70s. According to the World Health Organization, as well as being one of the least happy developed countries in the world, the United States is, by a wide margin, almost the most anxious, with nearly a third of Americans likely to suffer from an anxiety disorder in their lifetime. A 2012 report by the American Psychological Association warned that the nation was on the verge of a stress-induced public health crisis, and guess what? Wow, have we become more anxious, more scared, more fearful, and less happy, and more miserable than when we were back in 2012. And there are many reasons why life in America is likely to produce anxiety compared with other developed nations: long working hours without paid vacation time, insecure employment conditions with little legal protection for workers, inequality, and the lack of universal health care coverage, to name a few. Yes, Americans, the great American experiment, the exceptional Americans, there's no other place in the world to live but the United States. Really? Bend over and take it. I love my delusion. It makes me happy. Without that delusion, oh my God, I'll be miserable. So I'm going to hang on to the delusion that, oh, we're not being screwed over and over and over again. No, we're Americans. Okay, fine. It's getting harder to pay the bills. Okay, fine. I lost that job. I'll just go out and find another one. Pound that pavement, send out the resumes. 6 weeks later, no job. Ah, you're being judged. You weren't positive enough. Yes, the list is long. The happiness-seeking culture is clearly supposed to be part of the solution, but perhaps it is actually part of the problem. Perhaps America's precocious levels of anxiety are happening not just in spite of the great national happiness rat race, but also in part because of it. Good article. Loved getting somebody else's perspective on Americans. She's right on, but it has been an obsession. Gotta get happy. Gotta be happy. Gotta keep up with the Joneses. Oh, and then work that into being a consumer. A consumer society, a consumer economy is what we have. We're consumers. Okay, I'll buy another TV, a bigger TV. I'll buy a better iPhone. Oh, well, if I just buy these pants and these shoes and how about buying that piece of cake? How about money, 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 money does not make people happy. What makes people happy is having strong, supportive networks, having close, trusting friends and family. And we've lost that. So consider this part one of perhaps several parts, because Americans, the reason why I came across this is because there has been an increasing amount of articles on how miserable Americans are. But they can't admit it because, well, the other part of being happy is being real and then having real people in your life. Happiness is oh so elusive when everybody is pretending to be something they're not. And that is the American way. So, the link is below. Hope you enjoyed it. Ciao.